I deployed again in April of 2021, again to the Middle East, this time as the detachment officer in charge. So I took the whole detachment of 200 and some Marines and sailors, and we were in Kuwait, and then we were in Saudi Arabia, and then we finished out our deployment going to respond to the evacuation in Kabul, Afghanistan. I am originally from Wilmington, North Carolina, and I now live in Dana Point, California. My last duty station was in Miramar, which is about an hour south of here in San Diego. But since I left active duty, I've moved up north of Camp Pendleton in Dana Point. So before I EAS'd, I bought this van, and I have done some travel abroad, and I've done travel in the van. But before I EAS'd, I knew that I wanted to take a little bit of time off in between active duty and then kind of starting the next chapter. So the van is part of that journey for me. One of my friends who I saw when I was traveling, he has a 7-year-old son, and his son called it a transformer, which would be a cool name for it, but I feel like it's a little more feminine than that. So yeah, I love the van. Genuinely, really love it. So my grandfather on my mom's side was in the Navy during World War II. My grandfather on my dad's side was World War II, Korea, and Vietnam Marine. And both were important in my life growing up. We had great relationships. I had a great relationship with my grandparents on both sides. So the Marine Corps was always there for me in a way that I didn't know how much it would become a part of my life. On a whim, I called the Marine Corps, the Marine recruiter in Raleigh, North Carolina, and spoke to a captain who was there as their OSO, and he drove down the next day. So he drove from Raleigh to Wilmington the next day. We went to lunch, and I just remember feeling like he was so professional. He was very clear about requirements. It was not something that I walked away and thought like, oh, I can do that, no problem. Like, I remember feeling like it would be hard and it would be a challenge, and that I wasn't actually sure that I could do a lot of the stuff that I would have to do. And I think that most parts of my life that have been the most worthwhile for me have been hard and have been something that I wasn't sure that I would be able to do right out of the gate. So my first duty station in Camp Lejeune, I was with Headquarters Battalion, 2nd Marine Division, and I started as the S4 Alpha for about 6 months. I attached to 2nd LAR and deployed with 2nd LAR to Romania with the Black Sea Rotational Force as the S4 Alpha as well. When I came back, I was a platoon commander at Truck Company in Headquarters Battalion for a year. This was around the time where women were allowed to go to division, women were allowed to serve in combat units that were previously closed. So me going to 2nd LAR, Light Armor Reconnaissance Battalion, was a big deal in that there were 4 women in the whole deployment. I knew that was significant at the time, but when you're working a job and you're trying to do a good job, it doesn't matter. Like, it's not something that I remember dwelling on, and I don't know that I dwell on any of it now, because it's just part of that process of the Marine Corps integrating women into places where we should be. On my first deployment in Romania, one of the things that we did was train to do evacuation operations for the Evacuation Control Center, so the ECC. And as women, because there were only 4 of us on the deployment, we trained a lot in female searching and had to be qualified in with tasers and OC spray, etc. And that was one of the contingency pieces for us on that deployment. So it's an interesting full circle for me to then be in Saudi Arabia as they're discussing deployment to potentially do a non-combatant evacuation operation, a NEO, in Afghanistan. And I remember telling my CO, Colonel Lang, that I had experience in that from when I was a lieutenant, and the ability for us to cross-train my detachment and prepare to go to support a NEO is probably one of the most rewarding things for me in the Marine Corps, because I think that as you grow up in the Marine Corps, whether it's OCS, TBS, when you're at any point, the Marine Corps makes a big deal about being versatile. We say any climb in place, we adapt and overcome. There's all these taglines, but to actually take a detachment of over 100 Marines who were slated to go to Afghanistan, cross-train them with EOD for searching, cross-train them with another unit, cross-train them with 2nd Battalion 1st Marines, who was our infantry battalion that we deployed with, and then deploy and go and support the evacuation is one of the most, rewarding but also iconic things about being a Marine. That wasn't one of our missions when we deployed, and the fact that not only did the Marines and sailors of the detachment do it, but they did it incredibly well. I would never have anticipated, and I wouldn't say I ever would want that as an experience, but the fact that that is how I left the Marine Corps on active duty was unpredictable, and I'm incredibly, incredibly thankful for the experience. In Kabul, there was so much, as I reflect on it now, there were so many moving parts with where the Navy, where our sailors were, and where support was, that it was complete delegation and trust down the chain of command and throughout the detachment. Because we had Marines and sailors in different places, supporting in different ways, operating independently and doing the right things based on what the situation needed. And so it was so much trust and a culmination of just great Marines, mature Marines, and truly people who wanted to help and make a difference, being able to go out and do that. It was completely chaotic. There was not good direction given about what the plan was and how we were going to do things. There were times where there was no aircraft coming in, but there were people coming in the gates. And so there were a lot of taskers that would come down really quickly, and I will never ever forget it, but like just so impressed by people who you would ask, like, can you do this? And Marines would just yell, oh, I can do that. And then they would go and figure out how to do it, like with no real genuine oversight, because you had to in that environment to accomplish the mission. We didn't have any transportation. We hot-wired heavy equipment because we had to make things happen. So chaotic, unclear, but also like wildly inspiring to watch your people just accomplish literally anything you ask them to do. The months that we had spent planning, nothing that we talked about happened. So like, it was just, we just made it happen. And so I would say there's two things. One is don't mistake passion for what you're good at. And I think that realization came to me. And once it came to me, I was like, I'm not necessarily passionate about big picture Marine Corps stuff. I am passionate about Marines and sailors. I'm passionate about people, but I'm not passionate about a lot of the other things that go into the Marine Corps or the DoD at large. But I'm really good at a lot of the things they ask me to do. And so those are not synonyms. And I think that realization, as soon as I came to that, I was like, this is the time, this is the decision point. Like, if you don't take the step, then you get stuck in the path. And now I'm gonna do 20 years and wish I'd gotten out in 10. So it was that, and then there'd been multiple times where I just wasn't feeling like, I was feeling stressed and challenged and stimulated in ways that, like, that was all there. I was busy. I definitely wasn't, there was never a time where I didn't have things to do or people to engage with and interact with and take care of. But it never felt like, I didn't ever walk away with like my cup full, like after a lot of those days. Like I always felt like a little bit like spinning my wheels. And I think there's two things too, where like, if that's how you're walking away feeling, like that's not, I don't want to feel that way personally, but I also don't want to be that person in the Marines. And so if that's not fulfilling you and that's not really like inspiring you and making you feel good on a daily basis, like you owe it to the Marines to turn around and walk away and love them and stay in touch with them and support them and stay connected. But it doesn't mean you have to do it on active duty in the uniform. It doesn't matter what your rank is. It doesn't matter how many years you were in. Like, especially the Marine Corps, my experience, it has an ability to bring you in fast and give you a new identity that just like puts a mark on your soul. Whether you love it or you hate it, you were a Marine. The organization that I'm doing a fellowship with, Team Rubicon, is started by Marines. It's really veteran-centered, but it's open to everyone. And the fellowship is designed for folks who are transitioning off of active duty. And so when I applied in January, I applied knowing that I would need help with that transition. And the fellowship is 6 months, and it's really designed, which I think, like in some universe, maybe Team Rubicon and TRS, the Transition Readiness Seminar, could like come together. But you take, you kind of start from like who you are and you know what your story is, and then you kind of go to what your story can be. And they do a lot of stuff with like Strength Finder and like what you're good at and what, not only what you're good at, but what you're passionate about. And then really honing in on like, you can rewrite your story just because you were X in the military. It doesn't mean you have to be that person now moving forward, or you can be. And so just empowering people, I think, to like lean into that insecurity and like lean into like some of the things that we're all feeling when we leave active duty, and then own it and then go forward with it. So I've been lucky in that way that I've definitely had some moments, and I think it's pretty normal, but I'm excited at the same time to be able to like take a step forward and know that I'm gonna be okay, not on active duty, outside of the uniform. So.